as frustrating as it is to be in ninth position purgatory like we appear to be, it is I do have to take a step back sometimes and think about like what a privilege it is to have this team. Welcome to the Vamos Morados podcast, your source for everything racing in Louisville City on the State of Louisville Podcast Network. I am Zach.
And I'm Benton, and we're here to talk about Racing Louisville today and their 2024 season.
It's over. It's recap time.
Yeah, trying to get myself excited, but disappointing
not,
year just because of the expectations I put on the team personally. But
I think my favorite chart, because we're numbers dweebs, so we've been looking up a lot of stats to prepare. FOTMob has, if you go to the team history page, they have a historical finish by year chart. And my favorite is that it's 9, but because the league keeps adding teams, the number has been like ticking up slowly because they've finished ninth place every season, but they've had a few more teams underneath them each time they've done it. It's one of the weirdest charts I've ever seen. I love it.
That's a positive.
I mean, I hate it. I hate finishing ninth every season, but
it's a positive way of putting it, though. Like with the number of teams below you increasing,
they've just ever so slightly gone up in the standings every season.
Yeah, the one thing I'm looking at right here that really kind of paints the picture of the season is on FBref. They have a list of all the games and the result, and the win, loss, and draw is color coded. Wins green, red for losses, and blue for draws. And at the beginning of the season, see all these blue Ds on there. That was back when we were complaining. It's like, man, I wish this team would stop drawing.
Those were the glory days.
And then they're like, okay. And that's when a lot of red L's start coming in the mix. You got a few green W's intermixed throughout, but not a great look.
So let's start it off. Let's just talk about the shape of the season. That's a good lead in. So, like you mentioned, it was, in hindsight, we were very frustrated at the time, but like in hindsight, a pretty good start. So they start the season off with 4 draws, a win, and a draw in the first 6. And I think we were frustrated with a lot of those draws because they were come from ahead draws. That a lot of games where they got out to an early lead and then let teams come back on them. But I mean, I feel like if you look at like number of goals scored, it does feel like that early season was when the offense was clicking the best. They just couldn't hold on to games. And then, they have the middle portion of the season. You've got kind of some mixed results. They go on 2-game win streak in there against the Red Stars and the Dash. But then they've also got 3 2-game losing streaks in there, a couple draws. But I think overall kind of like a just okay middle third of the season. And then a weird end to the season, the final third, because I would say overall disappointing because they were unable to get the results they needed down the stretch. But then you've got like they beat the Courage and the Thorns down the stretch, who are 2 teams that they've historically, I think, coming into this season or have been unable to get wins against. So it's kind of they won some games that we weren't really expecting, but lost the games that should have been easier than that and that they needed. So it kind of like the season as a whole, it's like it's real hard to have a very, very strong opinion one way or the other because there's a lot of conflicting information. There's a lot of threads that sort of never work out in both directions. They through the whole season, they never fully collapse, but also they never fully get it together. They're just sort of bouncing back and forth between almost getting there and almost losing it all the way up until the last game of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to me, it's almost like there's a lot of cases, but close but no cigar, right? So
Yeah.
first off, like the last, like honestly, basically September onwards, just throw it in the trash almost in terms of broad season context, because when they lost to Bay, we knew how important that was at that time. Like you could see the writing on the wall. We could see how the table was shaping up. Like to me, I think we're going to away. The matches before there, I mean, there were a lot of close encounters. I think back to the Gotham match away to Gotham. Remember that? It was April 28th. We
Yeah.
scored real late, had the win, and then they conceded 2 minutes later. And when I mean conceded, they they basically scored the own goal. It wasn't an own goal, but I mean they handed it to them. And I think there were a lot of situations like that. Like a lot of these draws probably should have been win. I know you and we watched that second match of the season together away to Houston, where we looked like the much better team, but game ended 0-0. And just a couple points could have
Well,
been
and
the difference for their season.
that Gotham game was such a backbreaker because that was coming off of, so team starts on 4 draws. It seems like they can't do anything but draw, and then have that huge 5-1 win against Utah. And I think we had all been like, oh, that like they're starting to figure it out. This is like turning the corner, gonna turn these draws into wins, and then to come straight back in that Gotham game right afterwards and not be able to hold on to a win again, like really took the win out. And then they go on to lose the next 2 after that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And another thing here, looking at the full season thing, is they never strung together more than 2 consecutive wins.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough, right? Like it doesn't really, I think there's a lot to be said for momentum, especially mentally, and they're never even like able to quite put that together.
Yeah. Well, and a big one is never won more than 3 out of 5. If you look at any sort of 5-game.
Yep.
Honestly, that late August through early September, they beat the Red Stars, lose to Rain, lose to Bay, beat Angel City, beat the Courage. That's actually like the best 5-game. I know the game that broke your hopes is right in the middle there.
Yeah.
But that is like the best 5-game they have on the season.
Yeah, I mean those 2 wins there you're talking about, the in later September against Angel City and the Courage, that did bring back what ultimately was a little bit of false hope. But
Yeah. What
I mean,
really I mean, I was mad about the Bay game, but after the Angel City and the Courage wins, I was like, okay, like maybe we can make that not matter. Is that loss to the Royals kind of that was where I lost the hope, because that was like, as a team they beat 5-1 earlier in the season. They absolutely needed that to stay in the driver's seat. And yeah, that's the one where I was like, I really did not feel like the playoffs was going to be in the cards, or at least it was not going to be in their hands.
yeah, I mean for most of that end stretch, we knew how critical points against Bay were going to be, just how things were shaking and panning out. Ultimately, there was one position between us and them at the end of the day there. But yeah, that broke my spirits, and ultimately, they only go on to win 3 more games after that. Everything else, there's what, 4 losses. That's the final stretch when they're supposed to be scratching and clawing.
as we didn't
win the
we
playoffs.
didn't mention up top, but so they were 6-2-5, win, draw, loss, the way it should be. At home, and 1-5-7 on the road. So 7-7-12 overall for the season. And the thing that really jumps out to me there is just only one win for the full season on the road is not going to get it done. They just barely have a winning record at home. I mean, you really need to build yourself more of a cushion than that with the home games. But what really jumps out to me is they only got 8 points total for the year on the road. And so I think big thing next season is like the team has to figure out how to win away.
Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is you turn one of those draws on the road to a win, and you find one more win at home or even on the road. Like that's just, I mean, they were close to the playoffs. Like as much as I kind of seemed down on them.
Yeah.
They were only 4 points outside of it, despite how the season ended there. So like I was saying before, looking at some of these individual matches, even kind of big picture, close but no cigar. I think what hurts me the most there is the optimism I came into the season with, and I don't think it was unfounded, right? Like I thought it was the best put together team that they've had to date. And even after, and we'll probably talk about this, I'm sure at some point, all the trades and stuff that happened midway through the season, I think that leveled up the team. That was a net positive, but all end up not being quite enough.
Yeah. We can talk about this a little bit. So I guess the question always like, is it the roster or is it the performance? And
Yes.
it so it's a weird roster to me because I feel like it is probably the most talent they've had coming into a season of all 4 years, but it's also not like a very complete roster. I feel like they were maybe overly loaded in places and really thin in other places. I felt like the team had an abundance of midfielders that were of quality midfielders, almost to their own detriment, because I think one of the consistent struggles throughout the season was figuring out who the midfield three were going to be and how to get them to play together. And I thought they were decent up top in the attack. And I feel like the back line like really needed. Coming into the season, I was like, I would really like to trade one of these midfielders for another center back.
Yeah, that Ellie injury really hurt. Thinking in hindsight, like I think probably later in the season we were talking about some of this, kind of forgot how early on she got injured, and she definitely probably would have been in the mix for playing center back, since she kind of does that dual like defensive midfield or center back situation.
And even though they were deep in that position, so they were able to absorb it. I think the Ari injury really affects sort of the lineups a lot. Have to shift around some pieces to play in maybe areas they weren't planning on. But like that happens. You're always good. That's why you want depth, because you're always going to have to move some people around. But that said, I think like top to bottom, it's not like a top 4 roster, but it's also, I don't think, like a 9th place roster. I feel like they solidly had like a 5th through 7th to 8th quality roster this season. So it does feel like, though there was room for improvement, I think the results probably underachieved with the quality of the roster they had, just slightly, not huge.
Oh, I agree with that. I don't think we
Yeah.
were under any illusions that we were A, going to make the playoffs, and B, they were going to be playing at home, right? Like we knew we were going to be kind of one of those more fringy teams, probably.
Yeah.
And we also, I guess, have to keep in mind that we had a new coach, so we definitely, I think, had an understanding that there's going to be a level of a learning curve there, right? I don't
Yeah.
fault Bev too heavily for the full outcome of the season, um, because I mean this is what we signed up for, right? When you have a brand new coach, like there has to be a level of patience there and understanding, and I'm sure she's done a lot of growing as a professional over the course of that time, whether it's from tactical decisions in matches or how to handling the players, or even like roster decisions in terms of who do you sign, who do you let go, and things of that nature.
Yeah. So, speaking of roster decisions, so that we covered the roster coming into the season. So how do you feel about those sort of like mid to late season moves we made? So we picked up Becky. We picked up uh, Peterson.
Balser.
Picked up Balser. We traded away Pickett and Howell
And Rylan Turner.
and Turner. So I don't know. How do you feel about those overall? I feel like overall it just sort of shuffled some pieces around for the sake of shuffling pieces. I don't think the team was much better or worse overall from those three.
I'm personally, I'm a fan of it. I think sometimes some of these moves, it takes a little while to come to fruition, like in terms of like gelling and working with the team and an organization and whatnot. So I think there's still a little bit level of growth there.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are concerned about the whole concept of mortgaging our future for the present, and I don't entirely agree with that, because there's still a good bit of youth on this team, and at a certain point, you can have too much, right? Like we needed players who are ready now to play and perform, and players who have been there and can help with those younger players that are still within the mix. So I do like the improvements, particularly Janine Becky. She's really impressed me as well. Balser, I think's
I,
been worth her weight.
I would say overall, I think Balser to me was the best pickup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I think it really sucks to lose Howell, especially like she was team captain a couple games before that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, you have to
also
make
we
tough
talked about
decisions though. They recognize there's an
midfield
abundance in
logjam. I
midfield.
mean, like
Yep.
they really Flint came in and played sort of the spot that Howell wants to be in, and was playing it at like a all league level for stretches of this season. So I think that's understandable if you just feel like that's Flint's spot now.
Yeah.
So like um Turner, I feel like, and you don't know, like maybe she was going to leave in the offseason, didn't want to stay here, so you're getting something back for her rather than nothing. So like if that's the case, then that's a good trade. If it was like purely a move to improve the team, I don't feel like it did that much. I think that was the most spin the wheels to me. I feel like Turner for Becky, which is kind of what it ended up being. I still, even after the season's over, would rather have stayed with the youth there. I don't think she added so much to make that trade worthwhile, but I do think bringing in Balser for Howell was just on the merits like a pretty good trade. I think that improved in a spot they needed some improvement without giving up too much as it played out this season. It really sucks to lose Howell. And then Pickett was just a case of like a player wanted to leave and we traded on it. That one, it was not much of a like X's and O's decision.
Yeah.
That one hurts the most for me because like that like I was so happy when we picked up Pickett. So she's the player I think it most sucks to see leave. Especially because like we did not have anyone who could replace her really.
Yeah. I guess for what's worth, if it makes it, I guess, feel any better, she was on the older end of the spectrum. So if you're trying to find, ensure there's some like level of balance, or not like having, players who only have a little bit like left in their career, if we're envisioning players only playing till about their mid 30s or so. I mean, I agree with you though. Losing her sucks. Still definitely a lot of value for the now there. She's not going to keep. She wasn't going to keel over and die after the season, right? Still definitely maybe a couple more seasons left in her.
Yeah. So of the thinking back to last offseason, of the players we added during the last offseason, does anyone's performance stand out? What ended up in hindsight being the better acquisitions from the offseason? We already talked about it, but like Flint clearly, like
no, I gotta rewind to the additions that were at the at the beginning of the season, because my attention
Sears,
had turned to the mid-season ones.
As we are talking, Sears is getting her second national team call up, so she will be the last draft class ever for racing.
Yeah, who else did we get on there? I think we picked up. I'm looking through the list right now. Aaron Wright, I know, is another one that we had gotten the offseason as well.
And she put in a solid season, especially after Pickett left. Like that was, and with Pikuyamsa getting hurt, I think Wright was able to steady the ship a little bit there at playing center back.
Yeah.
So a solid. Plus, it's like nice to see her get to come closer to home finally. After the career she's had. Millie Clegg, we barely saw. Matt Hollow, we barely saw.
I was even listening because I feel like a lot of the signings that we had didn't end up playing.
Yeah, we did.
She didn't play. Yeah, Kurosaki didn't play at all. Clegg played 19 minutes. Angela Barron, I think she was a later signing, but still, she played 13
we forgot
minutes.
That in the midseason signings. Barron, yeah.
Well, because I think that was more one for the future. There was not immediate plans there, which is fine. Like Linda Malotha was the biggest head scratcher there, because it was almost sold, or at least I perceived it as she was going to be like a for replacement for Temby. And then she goes on to play 4 minutes.
Clegg was a little confusing because I mean, she's young, so
very young.
She's very young. I wasn't expecting her to be like the out and out starter, but I would have expected, like I thought that was a pretty solid signing for the team. I would have expected, especially. See, the thing is that they were fighting for that last playoff spot up until the very last game of the season. So there was not like a lot of garbage time, especially with all the draws. But I would have expected to see her check in the second half of games more often than she did. That is one question. It's not like it was smooth sailing and everything. Like we locked into a starting 11 that we shouldn't have made changes to. Do we feel like we should have seen a little more week to week roster movement from the team?
That's what I was just thinking about. And if I have one piece of feedback for Coach Bev is that we seem very conservative on the personnel selection front, right? Like, and there's a lot we don't see, so there could be very good rationale for why some of this stuff didn't happen. So I'm not.
We don't have the deepest roster, so it's understandable, but it's also
particularly like early-ish in the season. Like if somebody like a Millie Clegg is showing enough, like why don't you like just give her a little bit of time and see what you have? Like, when the lights are the brightest, is that when she really kind of steps up? So I don't know. I think there was a little bit of opportunity to particularly some of these younger players, give them a little bit of time here and there, and just kind of and see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Again, it was too much. Like it felt like too much same in game out.
Well, and also like I know there's a minimum and maximum roster, but it's like at a certain point, you know, because we were above the minimum, so if we're rostering players that are never going to play, are we better off cutting down a little bit and focusing on being able to maybe bring in a couple high quality players at the expense of maybe having a few less on the team? That's just that's a question I have. Is that we had a lot of players that we barely saw.
It's almost like the right hand not talking the left hand. Like was there a plan going in with these players, or did we sign them and then realize like, oh, we weren't actually going to do anything with them, or this wasn't this doesn't fit our vision,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems odd, like how some of these players were completely MIA, unless they just showed up to, like, we scouted them. They showed up to the training grounds, and they were just, for lack of a better term, garbage, and we didn't play them for that reason. So something is definitely amiss, or certainly not optimized on that front. Whether it was our scouting of them, or our planning for them, or
It
like I
kind of
said, I
seemed
was
to
talking
me
about
like
before,
we
usage.
very early on settled on like the group of players that maybe we were comfortable with and didn't want to deviate outside of that. And I do think maybe, I mean, especially when you're in a position like racing, it's like they're not a front runner. I think you probably need to take some swings as a team.
Exactly. Especially like later in the season, when some of these games it didn't look like the team went to be there. I'm staring at you away at Bay. Like, put in players like Matty Percorny. Do we have players who might be better, like have better skills? Yeah, but Matty will out hustle the vast majority of them. Like, at a certain point, like,
We got
I
all the
always feel like that
Pecorniacs
has
out
to
there
be
for a
more of a
reason.
factor. Yeah, I'm a Pecorniac. Like, I'm a big fan. She got 0 starts.
But see, like Picorni and Goins had like kind of the sort of seasons I was expecting Clegg to have, which is like no starts, but they both got into double-digit amount of games. Like Picorni played in 12 games, Goins played in 14. Like put him in for the last couple minutes, try to get a spark. I would have expected to see that from some more players. I have some tactical questions going into next season because I think for me, the back line is just something that needs to be addressed personnel wise.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
not really a tactics thing. That's just like we need to sign
1,000%
some higher quality backline players. The biggest tactical question to me next season is, we never this entire season figured out how to have Flint and DeMello on the field at the same time in a constructive way. If you look at the passing charts from the games where both of those players were on the field at the same time, there were like almost no passes between the two of them, like almost no like goals added. Just that just with the way those two players play, that should be one of the strongest passing lanes for that team. Like with Flint coming out of that defensive up to DeMello on the attack. And I think for me, other than addressing some backline depth, the biggest question mark that needs to be solved to have a successful season next season is like, how do we get our two best midfielders to play on the field at the same time constructively?
Yeah.
And that never got figured out this season. And honestly, kind of had trouble figuring out where to play DeMello the whole season. She kind of bounced around between wing and attacking midfield in a way that I feel like never really put her in her best position. But I think like if the team is going to succeed next season, that pairing needs to work.
Yeah, they need to definitely spend some time very intentionally cultivating the relationship of those two players and how they're going to work with one another on the pitch. I agree with you. You know, if you're starting with a blank slate in terms of your tactical setup, you got to figure out what you're going to do with those two and then kind of build around it.
Yeah.
Are they both going to be like kind of true midfielders doing a little bit both on the defense and attack? Do you want to like have one be a little more defensive oriented, kind of like what Jalen Howe was doing, and let Savannah be more like attacking sort of presence? Whatever that sort of configuration is, maybe is the answer bumping DeMello out wide on a more permanent basis. Whatever that is, I think that needs to be a focus of the offseason and preparing for, because I think it was something we were kind of figuring out on the fly. And if you can have a lot more dedicated training time to figuring that out and getting that real nailed down, I think it will benefit not only them but the team much more.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you.
I guess we should shout out. So looking at season stats for the players. So Ersig, Katie Lund, and Lauren Millay, I think no surprise, were played every minute of the season again.
No, Malay did not.
Oh, Millay missed like 1 minute, didn't she?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Like technically not. Yeah.
I like you can be official. I'm counting.
I agree with you because I remember exactly when she subbed up. I was like, no, her Iron Woman
Yeah,
status.
sorry. Looking at the minutes, it's 23:40, 23:40, 23:39. Okay,
I want to say it was either it was like the front half of the season or near the midway point or something. Like it was not near the end of the season when this happened, when she got subbed off. But I already thought that. I'm like,
anyway,
no.
Started every game. The three of them started every game. Officially, two of them played every minute. And not a surprise there. I think that's the same three that did that last season. Probably. So, I think another really good season from Lauren Millay, and I think an underappreciated. We have not mentioned her until now. I think kind of a core player on the team. I think from Katie, I think it's one of. It seemed like her position in possession changed. She got asked to do a lot more in possession this season than she has in years past, and I think it was a struggle the whole year. And so I think more questions for Lund coming into the offseason than we have had in years past.
Well, I think it more so comes down to a tactical decision, right? Like,
Yeah.
how determined are you to have this option to play out of the back? Because if you're going to do that, it can't be with Katie Lund. That's just not within her skill set. And that's okay. She's an incredible shot stopper. Just one of her skills is not this distribution element, right?
Yeah.
So you either got to drop that, or if that's really what you want, then all of a sudden the goalkeeper question comes up. And I don't think that latter's the answer. I think you gotta just accept that you have a good goalkeeper that's not good at this one thing you want them to do. Don't make them do it.
Yeah. You got to play with the players you have.
Yeah, this league is too talented because I mean they'll, as we've seen before, take advantage of the occasional slip ups that will happen in that scenario.
Yeah. And then I think this is probably my hottest take. I got into it with Road Dog at our old man game. Chris, friend of the show. I feel like this year is the end of being able to count on Ersig as a every game lead the defense player. I think it just felt to me like the leadership is still there. She's not a player I want off the team, but I think she struggled in some one-on-one situations in ways we have not seen her before. And I think like time is cruel and comes for us all. And I think like we're at the point where the physical demands of the league, I think she's going to be unable to keep up with moving forward. I
Yeah.
think she's still an incredible asset to the team, like still a leader, but they need players who can play that position on the team. We cannot be relying on another Iron Woman season
Yeah.
from Erceg next year.
I completely agree. Everything you said there, it makes complete sense. Father Time catches up to us all. She just turned 35. I'm 35. Like,
Which is young. I mean, that's fine.
yeah, yeah, we're very young, very young.
I'm
Yeah,
36. I
yeah,
can still play soccer. It's fine, but
yeah. It's becoming less and less reasonable for me to fantasize about being a professional athlete. Even though I
I'm
put in.
here if Danny wants to give me the call. Just like I mainly want access to the team physical therapist at this point. That would be the biggest signing perk for me.
I think you're just here for the physical therapy. But like, yeah, I think if we're planning on her being a game in, game out starter for next season, I think that's a sign that we could be missing in the playoffs. With all due respect to Abby, I think that'd be a sign of bigger problems, more so than that she would be the entire breaking point. But I think there does need to be an immediate succession plan. I certainly think she definitely plays a role in this team. I just don't. I think this was probably her last season as an Iron Woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. The back line needs help pretty urgently.
As far as the other stats, no one really. So as far as goals scored goes, no one really separated out. So DeMello and Sears and Kanu all scored 5. Turner scored 4. Flint scored 3. Balser scored 8 on the season, but only 3 of those were for Racing. So technically, Balser was the leading goal scorer on the team for the season, but they were not all for Racing.
Yeah, and
Which is why I am. We have not gotten any announcements, but I am hoping we're able to bring Balser back because I think, or I have not seen any announcements. You might know, but I think it would be very good to have her for a full season next year.
yeah. I
Um,
Off to the side here, I was looking at in terms of like on a per 90 basis the goals, and Bolster obviously did really well, but one person who did really well and their abbreviated minutes compared to some of the other peers is Canoe. About half a goal per 90 minutes to Bolster's 0.35, which 0.35 is still pretty solid.
yeah.
Um, if we're able to get more playing time out of Canoe, a couple of goals could
And
have been made a real difference over the course of a full season,
had an
especially how close it was
incredibly
to Racing.
promising start to the season from Kanu.
Yeah,
And then, we've got Olympics break. I think she had some injuries that kept her off the field for a
pretty
bit,
sure,
but like
right? Yeah,
really sort of fell off near the end. A full season where she looks like she did for those first couple games would be incredible.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as far as assists goes, this is really where the team is no one with more than 2 assists. Although I will say it's not an assist heavy league. I was looking at some overall league stats. I think the league has never had a 10 goal, 10 assist player in the history of the league.
That's
But
hard because like a stat like that, like is
yeah,
relying on the number of games, and by virtue of having less teams in the mix,
yeah.
we don't have as
But
many.
that said, not having a player with more than 2, I think speaks to like some struggles as far as like tactically, like getting scoring opportunities, moving the ball up the field. But yeah, DeMello, Turner, DeGrande, Pickett, Borges, Ersig, and Malay are all tied with 2 assists. So, I I don't. Depending on how it shakes out with who's re-signed and who's leaving, I think some big holes to fill in the defense. Otherwise, like not like a seismic change needed, I think, with the in the midfield and the attack on the roster. Just
Yeah.
I think that's more of a tactical adjustment than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. I could see that like roster decisions going like a number of different ways. There could be a lot of stability and there could be a lot of shakeups. I think it would be really dependent on what they're looking at in terms of free agency or international signings
And it
on
also
there.
depends on, like, I don't know what the contract situation is with
Yeah,
everybody. So I
I
don't
was
know
about to
who's
bring
for
that
sure
up
coming
as
back,
well.
who's unsigned. Yeah. So
But I think step one is looking what you have and putting together a team sheet, and with the knowledge of like, hey, some of these positions we gotta like leave that open because the pieces that we have may not be the best fit for that role that we're looking for, and then kind of take things from there.
yeah.
I don't envy Coach Bev and Ryan Dell, but that's why they get paid the big bucks, is to make these kind of decisions and do this kind of calculus, because it's the work that they're doing now that's it's going to really set the tone and the framework for this upcoming season. I mean, wheels are already in motion, and I'm sure they were before this conclusion of this season.
So do you have any other thoughts on the season as a whole? Do you want to get into some superlatives?
I
The
mean,
time
just my
honored tradition here.
thoughts as a whole is just like just a general sense of disappointment. Like I didn't always get the sense, particularly towards the end of the season, that every player on the pitch was giving it their all for the entirety of the 90 minutes. And all it takes is 1 minute of being switched off to cost you. And it's disappointing from a fan perspective, and it that also in some ways could have been the difference between them making the playoffs and them not. So I'm hoping that this is like a lowest point, and then it's only going to be uphill from here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a really hard season for me to pin down because on the one hand, it's very disappointing results. I think we all really thought this needed to be the season that they finally made the playoffs. But on the other hand, like they were right there. I mean, it's like a couple very small changes, and they make the playoffs. So
Close only counts
like
on horseshoe and hand grenades.
yeah, but it's like it doesn't feel like it's a like the wheels never fell off. Like it never feels like a man. Like we got to change everything up. Like it feels like some tweaking should be able to
Zach,
get
we
you
lost
there.
4 of
But
our last 5 at the very end of the season, where they knew every point mattered.
yeah.
I don't know if I completely agree with the wheels not falling off part.
But what like even then, like they were still in it until the last game.
Yeah, you're right. The other teams let them stay in it very
Yeah.
much.
But yeah, all right, let's get into superlatives. Let's do the fun ones first. Do you and I can jump in if you have to think about this one because I'm springing some of these on you.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite goal from the season?
Oh, trying to see if any particularly jump to mind.
There were weirdly, I feel like not as many memorable goals as years past.
Yeah, I don't have a specific one that's jumping to mind. Did you have one in mind when you
I can
came up
jump
with this?
in. I mean, like just the first one that comes to mind, like the goal that sticks out, it's because it was still the good times when it happened. The goal Alexa Barr scored in the home opener, where we got the ball and just like she took off and they played a diagonal ball to her and no one could keep up with her speed. Uh it like is Orlando ended up being a very, very good team this season. Uh, they got the lead. They had not let them come back and make up the 2-goal difference yet. That's that's when I felt the best about the season.
Now, did Borges hit a banger of a goal this season, or am I making that up, or was that a previous year that I'm thinking of?
I mean, she had a banger last year. I feel like she had
Maybe that's what I'm thinking back to then.
she had a good goal this year. Um, yeah, it's hard to think. Like I feel like there were not as many bangers as there were last year. Like DeMello and Borges were on fire as far as like the highlight goals last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I none of them stand out as much this year for me. It was not the year for so what about who is your newcomer of the season? It's two we really only had a couple to choose from for rookie of the year. So for the individual team, we switched that to newcomer for the season. So what player that was new to Louisville do you think had the best year?
Obviously I'm kicking around in my head Emma Sears and
I'm gonna say the one you don't.
And Flint. I mean, there's good cases for both of them. I'll go ahead and go with Sears because it really just kind of captured headlines, caught attention. It was a source of some optimism and excitement for the team, her performances, and it got her in the national team setup. So, I'll go with Sears with Taylor Flint, obviously almost essentially tied with her because she had a phenomenal season and was a big asset for us. enough for us to warrant trading away Jalen Howe, which is pretty big.
I will go with Flint there. I mean, like we knew she was going to be good. She's a good player. She has a history of succeeding in the league. I was not expecting her to step into the position she did, though. She played much more of a defensive midfielder role than she has in years past, and excelled. I think more than anyone was expecting in that role.
She definitely exceeded expectations.
I think if you take the being a rookie out of it for Sears, I think Flint overall had that. Just looking at if you look at FOTMOM rating, she was the highest rated player for the season for racing. So I think Flint is definitely for me the biggest offseason pickup they were able to make last year. Do you have a favorite game this past season?
Well, I think the obvious choice is the thumping of the Utah Royals because it was the one thumping we got to give out. It was that was on Thunder, if I'm not mistaken, right? So it was the big crowd one.
Yep.
Yeah, I was doing the call for the Louisville City game, so I didn't get to be present for it, which is really disappointing.
I kept getting frustrated because they were so close several times to scoring one of those goals right as the Jets flew over. They never got the timing just right.
So I'm a really big fan of flyovers. So I know if I was present at that one, every 5 seconds I would have been looking up watching the airplanes. I don't care about the fireworks, but the planes, I'm all for that. But we're gonna go with that one because that was definitely the high point of the season.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with I would not consider it the high point of the season, but the 2-1 win against the Courage at home. I feel like that's a team that's just absolutely had Racing's number the entire time the team has existed. That was they ended up not following through, but that was a really important time of the season to be getting wins to stay in the playoff hunt. They not only, and it was not a lucky win. Like if you look at the expected goals, it was 2.6 to 1.2. So they like legitimately outplayed that team.
Mm-hmm. It's their second highest, only behind the one I mentioned.
Yeah. So for me, like that's where if they had tacked on like 2 or 3 more of those performances, throughout the season. It's a completely different year. But that does show like what the team was capable of, and down the stretch, like that was one of the must-win games that they actually did win. So that's my game of the season. What would you grade the year overall? Letter grade. I know you're disappointed. I guess we get to find out how high your academic expectations were.
I'm gonna go with a C minus just because I think they were just below the bar that we had set for the team. It did feel pretty bad along the way at times, which is why I was flirting with the idea of like a D plus. But I'm like, you know what, like in all, if keeping a level head, I think a C minus is probably a fair grade if I'm not going to be overly harsh.
Yeah, I was debating whether it was a C minus or just a C, because
Just the C to me would have
for,
been them like barely making that last playoff spot, which is like that is
see,
average.
this is where we
what
get into like
expected.
the household you grew up in. A C was not an acceptable letter grade for me to get. So,
oh yeah, I know, I agree.
For me, a C is slightly below expectations.
I'm trying to look at it in terms of what the grades are.
Yeah, so I would say in the Allen household, that this was a C season.
All right, fair enough.
For me, I feel like, I think the expectation was to make the playoffs this season. Like Tomas is voicing his frustration with how the season went by knocking stuff off my shelves.
While you're doing the cat, I want the listeners to know that I also grew up in an academically rigorous household, and my bar was not lower.
But yeah, so I would also go with I would just go a regular. It felt to me like it was never so far out of reach, but they also never really got there. So, do you have any superlatives? You gonna hit me with any surprises?
I was going to ask what your I guess your biggest disappointment of the season was, but it was probably, I'm going to guess
it's the Bay game. It's for both of us.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Royals one that came after that.
I mean, well, okay, now you're making me.
How you were talking earlier led me to believe that it was going to be that one. For me,
I feel like the Royals one is what really crushed the momentum. The Bay game was like in hindsight, like, because they were still like in an okay position after that, but it's like, man, I feel like that one's gonna really burn us later. Whereas the Royals game, I think in real time, it's like that was an opportunity to move ahead that was missed. That they are not going to get back.
Yeah.
So yeah, just so we're different. Yeah, I'll say it's that Royals game.
Yeah, I don't have any other special superlatives coming to mind. I'm not feeling so inspired where anything's jumping off the page.
Yeah. Well, hate to go out of such a downer, but I did want to take a moment. As frustrating as it is to be in ninth position purgatory like we appear to be, it is I do have to take a step back sometimes and think about like what a privilege it is to have this team here. I think, gosh, like 6 years ago, I would not have expected we'd be in a position to watch like national team players week in and week out play here in town. I think as frustrating as the results can be, I still try to keep a perspective, like how fortunate we are to be one of the few cities to have a team in this league, which I think is still the best women's soccer league in the world. Come at me, Europe. So I feel very fortunate to be in the position we're in, to have the team here, to be able to to talk about them and spew my nonsense week in, week out. So I wanted to thank everyone involved with the team for another season, that though it may not have gone down the way we wanted.
Yeah.
Thank all of the listeners of the podcast, even though anytime anyone mentions it in person, like, oh hey, I listened to the pod, the first thing in the back of my head that I have to put down is I'm sorry. But yeah. So man, things did not shake out the way we wanted for a fourth year in the row. But like, we got another season next season. I'm not fully distraught. If we can just stick to it long enough, maybe they're going to be more than 9 playoff teams, and we'll make it into the playoffs at some point with our 9th position finish.
Let me put to you this way. I'm a Cincinnati sports fan. I know pain. The bad times make the good times all that much better, right? Like, I endured, the Carson Palmer years, the Andy Dalton years.
Hey man, the Carson Palmer years were the good years. That's when I was following the team.
No, that was like, they get your hopes up, and then Kimo Van Olhoffen tears off his leg, and then all of a sudden you watch the Steelers go to the Super Bowl and win it. Anyway, but like, Joe Burrow comes along, and all of a sudden I'm watching the Super Bowl and the Bengals are there. Like, it's hard to emphasize like how good that feels when your team has been historically bad or just like good enough to get your hopes up and then let you down. So yeah, it sucked missing the playoffs for all these years for Racing, but when they finally do crack that code and then they do go on a run and they are looked at as one of the good teams in the league, it makes it feel that much better.
Also, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there, since I feel like I cursed Louisville City with my gut intuition this season of like, I think the season they don't make the Eastern Conference Finals is going to be the one where they win the league in the regular season. I also feel like with all the struggle this team has had making the playoffs, I don't think it's going to be the case that like they just squeak into the last spot. I feel like when they finally break through, they're going to get a home game out of it. I think they're going to either miss the playoffs or be like top 4. That's my prediction. I don't think they slip in the middle. I think when they figure it out, they figure it out.
Zach leads into his latest curse, mentioning his more recent curse.
This is a good curse. I'm using the powers for good this time.
Very, very good, Zach. Very good. Yeah, looking forward to brighter days ahead. Now, yeah, you summed up a lot of it. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening, and big shout out to the State of Louisville guys for helping us get our nonsense out into your ears. Thank you for helping make that happen.
So we're still doing a Louisville City recap. So this is not our final episode of the year, but for all the racing exclusive fans, this is probably the last one they care about. Do you have any recommendations to leave the people on for the season for the racing fans?
To be honest, I'm still just playing Metal Gear Solid 5.
Hey man, you can recommend Metal Gear Solid 5 every week if you want.
Actually, I've also, another thing is, me and my friends, we've gotten kind of more back into retro video gaming, so we're looking at like different solutions to play old Game Boy games and N64 games. And I
got a Game Boy if you need to borrow it.
I got one too, and I may or may not have put in a number of bids on the Goodwill auction site on cheap N64s, so I can tinker with like modding them really
if you
just
find a broken one, I can probably fix it for you.
So we'll see if I win any of this bids. I was not trying to spend over $30. If I can get it at N64 $30, I'll take that every day of the week.
I keep getting suckered into bidding on typewriters on the Goodwill website because I can't pass up a deal.
Yeah, I won't recommend the Goodwill site because it's dangerous, man. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game. There's a lot of good stuff on there if you like old stuff.
Some of the prices do get high on good things. There's other people watching it, but if you get in on some of those bids early, like, the prices start real low. Anyway, so yeah, I guess Goodwood Auctions is by default my my recommendation.
That's a good one. I got a kind of unique one. I had my rear derailleur. I was having some trouble. I broke a chain and it was shifting weird on my bike. And I checked out Falls City Community Bike Works for the first time last weekend because it was one of those deals where I knew how to fix the thing that I needed to fix, but it was going to require like $100 tool that I would use one time and then never again. And I didn't feel like pulling the trigger on buying the tool for one use. And so I went in, I knew about this place, but I'd never actually gone in before. So it's kind of like, it's like a community bike shop. So they've got like stands set up in there and you can go in and just like put your bike up and work on it yourself. They have like tools you can use. And they operate on like a donation basis. So it is like free if you want to just go in there. Like they have knowledgeable people in there to help you out. It's like a good opportunity to learn to do some stuff yourself. They host a lot of like workshops and stuff on bike repair and bike maintenance. They've got like a little shop where you can buy some like new and used parts. But yeah, it was huge. Like I gave them a donation, but it was way cheaper to go there than to buy the $100 part that I would never need ever again. So I got my bike working good again, and I kind of want something else to break because I want an excuse to go back there. It was a cool place. So
maybe your thing can be buying
up my bike.
Maybe your thing can be buying old bikes off the Goodwill site for cheap and then going and flipping them.
Yeah, I mean that
bike flipping a thing.
It's crossed my mind. You know me. Yeah, you know exactly. But yeah, it's if anyone doesn't know about it yet, it's Falls City Community Bike Works. They're on Logan Street, like a couple blocks down from Logan Street Market.
That's cool.
It's a very cool place. They're open Wednesdays and Sundays for like a couple hours. So check them out. They also have like people donate bikes there and they fix them up. So they've got some bikes for sale for like very good prices. So if you're in need of a bike, you can go there too.
Super cool. I think I've heard that name in passing, but I really didn't know anything about it. That's a neat concept.
Yeah, they the reason I knew about them is like for events, like forecastle in places, they're usually the ones who's providing those temporary bike racks. When you see like when they've got an area roped off with like a bunch of temporary bike racks, that's usually they have like out in front of the shop. There's just a giant stack of bike racks, so it's usually them doing that places. So yeah, they do a lot of good community stuff.
Cool.
Well, Ben,
it wraps it up for us today. As Zach said earlier, we got a Louisville City episode in us coming out, but that's it for racing for now. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in your feed soon. Take care and vamos Morados.
Bye, y'all.